Hey guys, tonight we step onto a warm strand of sand where the firelight flickers and the surf keeps up its lazy applause. The night presses close, salty and warm, and overhead the stars bloom like spilled sugar across a black tablecloth. You probably won't survive a solo canoe journey across the Pacific, let's be real. Because even with GPS and weather apps, you'd still panic after the first 20 miles. But Polynesian navigators, they did it without your iPhone, and with a kind of calm confidence that feels almost supernatural. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments, what's your location and what time is it as you're listening? I love seeing that constellation of listeners dotted across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fire on the beach throws long shadows as a group of navigators lean down and begin to trace in the sand. They press sticks, shells and fingertips into the grains to create a glowing star map under your nose. It looks simple, just a few dots and lines, but it's not. Each point is a real star rising or setting at a precise angle. They're showing you how the sky itself becomes a compass, a giant celestial wheel rolling night after night across the dome above. The sand crunches as one elder circles a group of stars near the horizon. He's explaining that when those stars rise, you set your canoe along their path. When they sink, you know you've crossed that invisible highway and entered a new one. It feels almost like playing a cosmic board game, except the stakes are whether you find land or just endless water. You crouch closer, noticing how their lines stretch from horizon to horizon, not clustered the way you'd see them in an astronomy app. These aren't pretty constellations for storytelling. They're working tools, and the irony. Modern astronomers with telescopes argue endlessly about the exact boundaries of constellations. But these navigators cut through the debate with practical lines that actually get you somewhere. One navigator presses a finger into the sand, pointing out a cluster of dots where Orion's belt would rise. You recognize it. 3 neat stars in a row, but they don't call it Orion. To them, it's part of a much larger highway of light. You laugh softly because it reminds you of how you once got lost in a parking lot, even with Google Maps, while these guys are crossing thousands of miles guided by 3 stars and a gut feeling. And the gut matters. They say you don't just watch the stars, you feel them. The fire crackles as someone explains that the whole sky is a wheel, and your canoe is the needle floating in its groove. You let that sink in, the idea that you're not just under the stars, you're inside their rhythm, like lying in a giant cosmic vinyl record. The night air thickens with smoke and salt, and you notice how quiet everyone grows when they look upward. The teaching is less about memorizing and more about absorbing. You start to feel it yourself. The stars aren't random glitter, they're coordinates, signposts, whispers of direction. One navigator smirks and tells you, half joking, that even if the stars failed, the spirits of ancestors would tug your canoe along. You can't help but grin, because even in this sacred lesson there's humor. It's like when you burn your toast and say it's the ancestors telling you to eat healthier. Meanwhile, astronomers still argue whether Polynesians had a formal grid system or a looser, more intuitive method. Some scholars write heated papers about it, as though the sand itself should take sides. But here on the beach, with smoke in your eyes and waves rolling in steady, the argument feels irrelevant. The method works. The canoe moves. The islands are found. You brush your palm over the cool sand where a star line has been drawn. Already the tide is creeping closer, ready to erase the chart. And that's part of the lesson too. Memory, not parchment, is where the road truly lives. The fire dwindles behind you as you step closer to the shoreline, where a dark canoe bobs against the tide. You slide your hand along its polished hull, still warm from the day's sun, and it smells faintly of resin and salt. The navigators gesture for you to climb in, and though you hesitate, visions of Titanic reruns flashing, you swing a leg over and settle onto the woven mat at the bottom. The canoe rocks gently, a motion you'll come to know like your own heartbeat. The night sky sprawls wider now that the firelight is gone. A soft ribbon of stars arches from horizon to horizon. The Milky Way, luminous and faintly dusty. You squint, wondering if your eyes are inventing the haze, but no. It's real. that cloudy band where billions of stars smear together. Polynesian navigators call it Telangi, the backbone of the sky, or sometimes a great pathway itself. You don't just admire it, you follow it. Imagine trying to use the Milky Way as your personal GPS, without the recalculating voice when you drift off course. Your guide sits across from you, knees bent, eyes tilted upward. He doesn't need a sextant, just a memory sharper than your phone's storage. He points out the Small Magellanic Cloud, two faint, ghostly smudges dangling below the Milky Way like spilled drops of milk. You probably wouldn't notice them unless you were far from city lights, but here they're impossible to miss. These galaxies aren't part of the Milky Way. They're neighbors, companions, visible without binoculars. Astronomers still argue whether they're bound tightly by gravity or just passing acquaintances in the cosmic neighborhood. Polynesian navigators didn't care. They cared that these faint clouds sat like anchor points in the southern sky, steady and reliable. You lean back, the canoe creaking softly, and the swell beneath it shifts with a low sigh. Your guide explains that when the Small Magellanic Cloud lines up at a certain angle with the Milky Way, it becomes more than pretty. It's a directional cue. Think of it as an ancient version of those little blue arrows in a map app, except here you don't lose signal when you sail too far. Your mind wanders briefly to modern astronomy. The Small Magellanic Cloud is around 200,000 light-years away, brimming with stars, gas, and clusters like the Tarantula Nebula. You grin at the name. It sounds less like astronomy and more like a Halloween candy. Still, the fact that you can use something so far, so immense, as a breadcrumb on an ocean voyage is both absurd and awe-inspiring. The guide chuckles, noticing your half-dazed stare. He taps the side of the canoe, reminding you to stay grounded. You nod, embarrassed, because you were daydreaming about aliens in that dwarf galaxy instead of focusing on whether you'd survive the night. He leans in, his voice calm. Stars don't move. You do remember that. And you realize that's the ultimate cheat code for ocean travel, knowing that the sky is constant while you are the one drifting. Water splashes over the side, cool on your toes. You notice how the waves roll in long, steady lines, the ocean itself a vast graph. Navigators read it like Braille, feeling the direction of the swells, the rhythm of currents that echo the pull of distant winds. Combined with the stars above, it's a layered map, one only visible to patience and practice. He gestures again, drawing your eyes upward. A triangle of stars, bright ones, flashes above. That's not random, that's a reference point, he tells you. Keep that triangle steady on the horizon, and you'll sail true. You smile weakly, because even when you try to hold your head still, the canoe rocks, the stars wobble, and your confidence evaporates. You're back to being that person who gets dizzy in a supermarket aisle. Yet humor sneaks in. Another navigator teases, saying that if you stare long enough, you'll start to see sea turtles swimming among the stars. You laugh, partly because it's absurd, partly because you do start to see the patterns blur. Maybe that's the trick. They lull you into accepting the sky as alive, not static. And as you tilt your head back, the faint glow of the Small Magellanic Cloud hovers at the corner of your vision. You think, somewhere, astronomers are still writing papers about whether this little galaxy was ripped apart by the Milky Way's gravity, or whether it wandered in like a lost tourist. Meanwhile, here you are, using it as a literal road sign in the middle of the ocean. Science can argue, but the canoe keeps moving. A breeze drifts over the water, bringing the smell of salt and something faintly metallic. The horizon is black. On black, sea and sky blending, until you can't tell where one ends. And there, in the faint smear of the Small Magellanic Cloud, you feel the strange security of knowing, at least tonight, you are not lost. The canoe has found its rhythm now, gliding over the swells with the steadiness of someone walking down a familiar street at night. You lean your weight slightly just to test, and the whole vessel responds with a creak and a sway that makes you second-guess whether that was wise. Still, the movement becomes almost hypnotic, like sitting in a rocking chair, except the chair is floating in the middle of the Pacific and you don't exactly get to step off if you feel queasy. Your guide raises his hand toward the stars again, this time pointing not at the ghostly smear of the Magellanic Clouds, but at a constellation that looks faintly like a crooked cross. You recognize it from a childhood planetarium trip, the Southern Cross, Crux. He explains that by drawing an imaginary line from its long axis down to the horizon, you can approximate the direction of south. No magnetic compass needed, just a mental ruler and a steady gaze. You tilt your head trying to picture this line, though the canoe's wobble makes your imaginary ruler look like it was made from overcooked spaghetti. Still, there's truth. Here, for generations, Polynesian navigators combined these reference points, the Magellanic Clouds, the Southern Cross, the Arch of the Milky Way, to orient themselves. You might call it overcomplicating things, but when every horizon looks the same, and your next pit stop is hundreds of miles away, overcomplicated is a survival skill. Astronomers still argue whether the precise methods were codified in rigid star charts or passed through more fluid oral traditions. What's certain is that each navigator carried the map in his mind, not in a glove compartment. The ocean swells murmur beneath you, the water lapping against the canoe's wooden ribs. Your guide crouches, presses his palm flat to the hull, and closes his eyes. He isn't praying, at least not in the way you assume. He's reading. The waves are a code, from which direction the wind has blown, which distant island has shaped the currents, and how the patterns overlap. It's like picking up 3 radio stations at once and somehow sorting them out without static. You wonder if you could ever learn to feel that much through your hand. And then remember you once dropped your phone because you thought it buzzed, but it didn't. So, probably not. The stars keep sliding across the dome of sky, steady but relentless. The Small Magellanic Cloud drifts lower toward the horizon, and your guide notes its alignment with a bright star nearby. To him it's a cue, a reminder that the canoe is angling just right. To you it's mostly an excuse to squint and wonder how anyone ever noticed this in the first place. But you don't say that out loud. Nobody likes the tourist who asks if the Mona Lisa is really worth it. Modern astronomy layers another perspective. The Small Magellanic Cloud, despite its name, isn't tiny. It contains several 100 million stars, though from here it looks like someone smudged their thumb on the sky. One of its quirks is that it's irregular in shape. Not a neat spiral like the Milky Way, but a lopsided fraying thing pulled and tugged by gravitational forces. Astronomers still argue whether it's being cannibalized by the Milky Way or if it will one day break free entirely. You picture the universe as a messy dinner table where galaxies keep stealing bites off each other's plates. Your canoe rocks harder, a swell lifting the bow. You grab the edge, fingernails digging into the wood, and immediately regret not tightening your grip earlier. Your guide glances over and grins, clearly entertained by your rookie panic. He says something in a tone that sounds like a joke, and the others laugh softly, their faces glowing faintly in starlight. You catch only one word repeated: cloud. You hope he means the Magellanic one, not the thunderous, storm-bringing kind. The night deepens. A chill creeps into the air, and you pull your shoulders up against it. The sea is no longer just a backdrop, it's a constant participant, shifting, murmuring, occasionally tossing you as if to test your resolve. You close your eyes for a moment, trying to steady yourself, and in the darkness you sense the swells more keenly. Left to right, forward to back, patterns emerge. You open your eyes again and notice how the stars slide in rhythm with that motion. Maybe that's the secret. You stop separating sky from sea and instead you read them together, 2 halves of one text. A stray thought crosses your mind. Somewhere, centuries ago, a navigator might have sat exactly where you are, staring at the same blur of the Small Magellanic Cloud, trusting it to guide him toward an island he'd never seen. He couldn't call ahead, couldn't reload Google Earth if he missed. He had only this, a smudge in the sky, a rhythm in the sea, and faith that his teachers weren't wrong. The canoe steadies again and you breathe easier. Your guide taps the side once more, and you feel a kinship, not just with him, but with the countless voyagers who trusted this method long before science confirmed anything. The Small Magellanic Cloud hovers at the edge of your vision, faint but insistent, like a lantern that never goes out. The night is so vast it almost presses against you. Every star seems closer, sharper, as if the atmosphere has thinned just for your canoe. You tilt your head back and realize you've been staring long enough that your neck aches. But it's hard to look away. Somewhere deep inside, the thought slips in. This is the same sky that the first humans to leave Africa saw, the same lights that glimmered over hunter-gatherer fires, over Roman villas, over medieval ships threading their way into unknown seas. You are just the latest in a line of gazers. Your guide adjusts the sail, a cloth stretched taut against the wind, and murmurs something to another crew member. The boat responds, shifting its angle so subtly you barely notice until you see how the Magellanic Clouds change position in relation to the horizon. It's a reminder that this isn't sightseeing, this is survival. A slight miscalculation here means days added to the journey, or worse, a destination missed entirely. You try to imagine keeping all of this in your head. The arcs of the Milky Way, the rising times of key stars, the way the clouds shift depending on latitude. You think about how you once forgot your email password for a week and wonder if you'd ever be trusted with steering. Probably not. Polynesian navigators trained from childhood, spending nights memorizing the star lines and horizons of their world. Some knowledge came from chants, some from watching elders, some from the sheer repetition of sailing. By adulthood, they carried a map more detailed than any parchment could hold. The Southern Ocean wind carries a scent of salt sharper than usual. Spray cools your cheeks. The sea isn't hostile tonight, but it isn't exactly gentle either. The canoe rises and falls on long, rolling swells, like a chest breathing. Your guide keeps one hand on the rigging, the other occasionally dipping toward the water, as though testing its mood. You realize it's not just the stars he consults, but the whole system. The stars, the sea, the wind, even the birds that sometimes pass overhead. A cosmos in motion, and he's part of it. Astronomers, of course, add their own layer of wonder. The large and small Magellanic Clouds are dwarf galaxies, irregular, each with their own stellar nurseries, vast regions where new stars ignite out of gas and dust. In the small cloud, the cluster known as NGC 346 gleams faintly, though invisible, to the naked eye. Through a telescope, it bursts with hot blue stars, some only a few million years old. To think navigators trusted these smudges for guidance long before humanity even knew what they were. What looked like a lantern was in fact an entire city of suns. The canoe continues forward, slicing water so dark it looks bottomless. You lean over briefly and see starlight mirrored on its surface, like a second sky opening beneath you. It's disorienting. Above and below, stars everywhere, as if you're suspended between two heavens. For a fleeting second, you wonder if this is what those early navigators felt. Not that they were moving through space, but that space itself carried them. Your stomach rumbles, a reminder that you are still flesh, still very much of Earth, no matter how cosmic your thoughts become. Someone passes you a piece of dried fish, salty and tough but grounding. You chew in silence, letting the rhythm of the waves fill in where conversation leaves off. The others speak softly among themselves, their voices blending with the surf, until it sounds like the ocean has learned to speak in whispers. And then, just when you've settled into the rhythm, the guide points again, this time to the horizon ahead. A star brighter than most has just risen. He grins as though this is a private joke between him and the sky. For you, it's just another pinprick of light. For him, it's a signal, a compass point, maybe even a promise. The canoe steadies, on its course, and you realize you've passed some invisible threshold, the moment when fear of the sea gives way to trust in it. You are no master navigator, but you've begun to see how the pieces connect. The Magellanic Clouds as beacons, the stars as rulers, the swells as sentences written in water. Slowly, you are learning to read the ocean's story. You settle into the canoe's steady sway, lulled by the creak of the ropes and the slap of waves against the hull. The stars wheel overhead with a slow inevitability, and you realize that the sky is not static. It's a clock, a moving diagram. The Magellanic Clouds drift slightly westward as the night advances, and you watch your guide's eyes flick between them and the horizon as though reading time itself. He explains, half in gesture, half in words you don't fully understand, that the Small Magellanic Cloud rises and sets at predictable angles, depending on where you are in the Pacific. He doesn't need a sextant, doesn't need latitude scribbled on parchment. He just notices where the cloud appears, how high it climbs, where it fades, From that alone, he knows his canoe's position. You realize the navigator is not looking at stars as you do. He's reading coordinates as surely as a GPS. Astronomy books will later call this celestial navigation, but here it feels less like science and more like a relationship. The navigator and the sky have an ongoing conversation, and you're merely eavesdropping. You wonder if the sky ever gets tired of repeating itself every night, every season, every year. Probably not. It seems proud to be noticed. There's a mainstream astronomy fact tucked inside the Small Magellanic Cloud. It's bound gravitationally to the Milky Way, but just barely. Some researchers suggest it's a temporary visitor, a dwarf galaxy that may eventually be torn apart by our own galaxy's tidal forces. Imagine that. Your trusty beacon slowly being digested by the cosmic predator you happen to live inside. Comforting, right? Don't worry. You'll be long gone by the time that happens. Unless cryogenics works out, in which case, good luck. With that, the canoe rocks harder for a moment, reminding you not to drift too far into theory. A stronger gust has filled the sail, and spray cools your face again. You brace yourself, grabbing the wooden edge of the hull. The guide barely glances at the waves. He's still watching the stars, as though the sea is merely background noise. You feel a little jealous of that calm, quirky tidbit. The Magellanic Clouds are not even visible from much of the northern hemisphere. They're a southern treat, a reminder that the sky looks different depending on where you stand. Ancient Polynesians knew this by heart. They knew which stars would sink below the horizon as they voyaged north, which ones would rise as they moved south. The absence of a star could be as telling as its presence. You think about how modern travelers sometimes panic when Wi-Fi drops for 5 minutes. Perspective is humbling. The crew shifts positions, their movements almost rehearsed. One tends to the rigging, another leans over the side to feel the water. You notice his hand trailing in the waves for a long moment, like a thermometer checking for fever. You ask about it quietly, and your guide grins. He says the sea itself has directions, currents flowing like invisible highways. Polynesian wayfinders could read them by touch, by color, by taste even. He dips his own hand and licks the salt off his fingers, nodding as if it confirmed something important. You're tempted to try it yourself, but you suspect you'd only taste ocean-flavored. Disappointment. Astronomers still argue whether the Magellanic Clouds are destined to merge fully with the Milky Way, or whether they'll orbit it like distant companions for billions of years. That debate feels oddly parallel to your own canoe. Will you eventually find land or drift endlessly? The answer, of course, depends on how well you read the signs. The night deepens. The stars appear sharper, as though the air has scrubbed itself clean. Your eyes sting a little from staring so long, but you don't want to blink. Each glimmer is suddenly precious. The Magellanic Clouds shine softly, a reminder that galaxies themselves can be navigational tools. It almost feels like cheating, using entire galaxies to stay on course. You wonder if somewhere far away, someone in another galaxy is using the Milky Way as their navigational smudge. If so, may they have better snacks. As you recline against the side of the canoe, exhaustion nudges at you. You're no navigator, but you've learned enough tonight to sense the rhythm. Clouds, stars, swells, winds. It's like listening to a symphony where you only know the chorus, but still hum along. And slowly, without quite realizing it, you feel yourself beginning to trust the sky the way the navigator does. The canoe cuts forward through darker waters now, and you notice how the air feels heavier, as if the sea has exhaled and settled into a deep sigh. Your guide doesn't reach for a clock or compass. He glances upward again. The Small Magellanic Cloud is tilted at a new angle, leaning just slightly closer to the horizon than before. You don't see how that slant could mean anything, but he nods like it's confirmation of a path he already suspected. What he's watching is not just brightness or position, it's motion against time. Polynesian navigators knew that stars rise 4 minutes earlier each night. They accounted for this, folding the sky's schedule into their memory. You lean back, realizing that the stars are a calendar running above your head, ticking steadily without batteries. The thought is oddly soothing, like the universe itself is keeping time so you don't have to. You remind yourself of a mainstream astronomy fact. The Small Magellanic Cloud sits about 200,000 light-years away, orbiting the Milky Way along with its bigger sibling, the Large Magellanic Cloud. That's far, unimaginably far, yet here you are squinting at it like it's a little street lamp to guide your canoe. It's absurd. Say it's perfect. The quirky tidbit tonight is that Polynesian navigators sometimes used what's called a star compass, not a tool, but a memory map. Imagine memorizing where hundreds of stars rise and set, then holding that map in your mind without paper or charts. You would know which star replaces another at the horizon, like a baton pass in a relay race. The Small Magellanic Cloud doesn't rise and set neatly like single stars, but its glow still takes part in the rhythm. The navigator uses that rhythm as proof of steady progress, a kind of cosmic breadcrumb trail. Your own gaze drifts toward the sea. The waves are not chaotic, they're patterned. You notice swells coming at angles, a crosshatch of invisible highways beneath you. You imagine them like threads, the ocean as one vast woven mat. The navigator must read these. Threads like Braille. It makes you smile, picturing him as someone who can hear the ocean speaking in riddles, while you can barely interpret your email notifications. Astronomers still argue whether Polynesian navigators relied more on stars or on ocean swells once the journey stretched on for weeks. Some say the stars provided the initial orientation, but the sea's rhythm was the ongoing guide. Others claim the opposite. The truth is probably a blend. Your guide seems to think of them as inseparable. The sky leans down, the sea leans up, and the canoe slips between. The night grows colder. You rub your arms and catch the faint smell of salt drying on your skin. The navigator offers you a woven cloak, heavier than it looks. You drape it around your shoulders and suddenly the chill vanishes. He chuckles softly, probably amused by your clumsy gratitude. You imagine him doing this 1,000 times before with wide-eyed passengers who know nothing of the sky. You're part of a long line of people squinting upward, trying to decode a message they've only just learned exists. You look back at the Small Magellanic Cloud. Its glow hasn't changed, but you realize your perception has. You're no longer staring at a random smudge. You're seeing a waypoint, a kind of lighthouse perched impossibly far away. It makes you wonder how many other galaxies could be navigational tools, if only we had the patience to map them. You joke quietly to yourself. Intergalactic GPS. Signal may take 200,000 years to load. The canoe doesn't laugh, but you think the stars twinkle harder for a second. The crew settles into quieter rhythms. One hums under his breath, a tune that rises and falls with the boat's pitch. You almost mistake it for the sound of the sea itself, as if human voices have blurred into the ocean's murmur. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the Small Magellanic Cloud painted on the back of your eyelids. When you open them again, it's still there, patient and steady, waiting for you to keep paying attention. That's the thing about wayfinding. It requires relentless noticing. You don't get to drift into autopilot. Every minute, some new clue arrives, whether it's a star sliding closer to the horizon, a swell tilting the canoe, or a breeze changing flavor on your tongue. Your mind feels sharper for it, though your eyelids feel heavier. You think about how modern people set alarms to remind themselves to hydrate, while these navigators let the whole sky and sea ring bells in their awareness every few breaths. The canoe presses forward. The navigator's gaze lingers on the Small Magellanic Cloud again, then flicks to the Large Magellanic Cloud beside it, the pair like bookends on a cosmic shelf. He nods once, satisfied. The course is true. You exhale, leaning into the wooden side of the hull. The universe feels immense. Yes, but not impersonal. It feels like it's watching you back, saying, "Relax, you're still on track." The canoe glides on, the night deepening into that peculiar stillness that comes after midnight, when even the ocean seems to sleep in long, slow breaths. You rest your chin on your arm, the woven cloak snug around your shoulders. Overhead, the Small Magellanic Cloud continues its quiet procession, and you can almost convince yourself that it's following the canoe, like a loyal companion rather than a distant galaxy. Your navigator shifts his weight and points, not at the cloud, this time, but toward the Southern Cross. Its diamond shape hovers above the horizon, bright and commanding. You recognize it from travel books, yet it looks utterly different when used in practice. For Polynesian wayfinders, the Southern Cross wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. When its long axis points toward the horizon, it marks south, steady as any compass needle. Pair that with the Small Magellanic Cloud nearby, and suddenly you have both a direction and a reference point for progress. It's strange to think of ancient navigators relying on constellations you might casually doodle in the margins of a notebook. They didn't just see stars, they saw relationships, angles, rising and setting points. Each one was a word in an unending conversation between humans and the cosmos. You try whispering to yourself, south by the cross, onward by the cloud. It sounds like a chant, something that could steady your heartbeat against the roll of the sea. There's a quirky modern echo of this knowledge. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station, hurtling around Earth at over 17,000 miles, and sometimes orient themselves with the Southern Cross and Magellanic Clouds when flying above the Southern Hemisphere. In other words, humans in a spacecraft still peak at the same markers as your canoe, just a few hundred miles higher. You grin at the thought of Polynesian navigators and astronauts sharing a cosmic toolkit centuries apart. The ocean murmurs in a new rhythm now. A swell runs diagonally beneath the canoe, nudging it at a slight angle. The navigator acknowledges it with a tiny tilt of his chin. You realize he doesn't fight the sea's patterns. He harmonizes with them. Like a dancer, he doesn't insist on leading every step. Sometimes he lets the ocean guide. You feel the canoe adjust almost imperceptibly, still aligned with the stars above. The balance between heaven and water feels seamless, as though the canoe is suspended on invisible threads, pulled taut between both. You try closing your eyes to test yourself. Can you feel direction without looking? At first, it's only disorienting, darkness. But then the rhythm of the swells seeps into you, a steady push from the left, a slight lift from the stern. Even with your eyes shut, you sense motion, steady and forward. You open them again and sure enough, the Small Magellanic Cloud is right where you thought it would be. The revelation sends a little thrill through you, like you've borrowed a fragment of the navigator's vision. Your guide doesn't comment, but there's the faintest smile at the corner of his mouth. Perhaps he noticed your experiment. Perhaps he's seen hundreds of passengers reach the same small victory. You wonder how many people have sailed this route before, guided by these same stars and swells. Entire lineages of memory crisscrossing. The Pacific, invisible histories written not in books but in lived journeys. The quirky fact of the night, Polynesian canoes didn't just carry people, they carried plants and animals too. Archaeologists have traced the spread of crops like sweet potatoes, taro and breadfruit across the Pacific, carried in bundles aboard these voyages. Chickens, pigs and dogs sometimes came along as well. Imagine that. A canoe full of sleeping, humans, restless chickens, and perhaps a pig snuffling quietly in the corner, all guided by the same Small Magellanic Cloud. The image makes you laugh quietly, breaking the silence. Your guide glances at you with curiosity, and you wave it off. He doesn't press, but you catch a knowing glint in his eyes. He probably remembers those voyages too. The stars grow sharper as the night cools further. The sky has a crystalline clarity, as though someone polished it while you weren't looking. You notice faint smudges beyond the clouds, the Milky Way stretching in a brilliant river. The navigator lifts his gaze there briefly, but returns to the small cloud. That's his anchor for this stretch of sea, his trusted companion. You realize it has become yours as well. Your eyelids droop, and for a moment you drift between waking and dreaming. In that haze, the Small Magellanic Cloud swells larger, until it looks like an island itself, a glowing land of light waiting to be reached. You almost believe you'll dock there come morning. A laugh bubbles up inside you at the absurdity, but it fades into the rhythm of the ocean. The navigator's hum returns, low and steady. It weaves into the sound of waves slapping the hull. You rest your head, comforted by the idea that the canoe doesn't need you awake to stay on course. The stars are awake, the navigator is awake, and that is enough. The Small Magellanic Cloud lingers faithfully above, whispering, "Keep moving, keep trusting, keep noticing." The canoe sails onward, and as dawn edges closer, the stars begin to shift in brightness. One by one they dim against the faint paling of the eastern horizon. You notice the Small Magellanic Cloud still clinging bravely to visibility, though its glow now seems fragile, as if reluctant to leave. The navigator watches this carefully, for the vanishing of stars is not an inconvenience, but part of the cycle of guidance. When one set of lights fades, another takes over. The rising sun, the flight of birds, the pattern of waves. It dawns on you that wayfinding isn't about clinging to one constant. It's about trusting in change. The sky will not always give you the same markers. The sea will not always rise in the same rhythm, yet there is always something to notice, always a clue. The navigator's art is less about memorizing a fixed map, and more about entering into a living conversation with the world. You rub your eyes and sit up straighter, fighting sleep. The ocean looks different now, its surface painted with a sheen of pewter, reflecting the softest hints of color from the horizon. The swell is slower, longer, as though the sea itself has decided to rest. The navigator touches the water with his hand, then brings it to his face. You mimic him clumsily, tasting the salt, wondering what more he senses, temperature, direction, some subtle change you can't yet discern. Then comes a surprise, a sudden burst of life at the surface. Flying fish leap from the water in quick, flashing arcs, skimming like arrows across the waves. You watch them, startled awake, their silvery bodies catching the dim starlight. The navigator barely glances, yet you sense this too is part of his reading. Fish migrations, bird flights, cloud formations, all weave into his mental chart. Even the erratic dash of a school of fish can tell him which season he sails through, which currents dominate below. It makes you smile to think that in the modern world, satellites and radar track such things. Yet here, with nothing but open sea, the navigator collects data as surely as any scientist. Except his lab is the ocean, his instruments the senses, his notebook the memory passed down from elders. You lean back, letting the canoe rock you, and think of another strange echo. On ancient voyages, navigators sometimes memorized star paths by creating chants, almost like lullabies. Each line of the chant carried a directional cue, a star rising here, a constellation, setting there, a swell coming from the east. These chants could stretch on for hours, sometimes days. The idea makes you laugh quietly. Bedtime songs that weren't just soothing, but absolutely essential for survival. Imagine falling asleep mid-verse and waking up uncertain of which star you'd sung last. The horizon brightens further now, streaked with pale rose and amber. The stars wink out one by one, until only the faint smudge of the Small Magellanic Cloud remains, dissolving into daylight like a candle guttering at dawn. You feel a pang, as if saying goodbye to a companion. But the navigator doesn't seem troubled. He shifts his gaze easily toward the eastern sky, where the sun is about to rise. For him, there's no loss, just the next step in the eternal relay between night and day. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but to listen. The canoe's wooden hull creaks gently, the water laps with a soft rhythm, and seabirds cry faintly in the distance. Already their calls hint at land not too far away, though still hidden beneath the horizon's curve. A thrill runs through you, proof that stars and swells have guided you correctly. Proof that you've traveled as countless navigators once did. As the first golden rim of the sun emerges, the navigator murmurs a few words in a language you don't know. Perhaps it's a prayer or simply a greeting to the new day. His face is calm, almost serene, bathed in light that feels like blessing. You whisper your own greeting under your breath, clumsy but heartfelt. Thank you. Whether you mean the navigator, the stars, the ocean, or the cloud itself, you're not entirely sure. Maybe you mean all of them at once. The sun rises higher, and for the first time since the voyage began, you see the sea clearly in all directions, vast, glittering, endless, yet strangely welcoming. You realize that your fear of its immensity has lessened. The stars, the swells, even the leaping fish have conspired to teach you that the ocean is not empty. It is alive, full of signs, full of companionship. You let the warmth of the light touch your face and think, if this is what dawn feels like in the middle of the Pacific, then perhaps you'll never look at the morning sky the same way again. The day stretches forward, and with it a different kind of navigation begins. Without stars, the canoe relies on the ocean's own voice. The swells move steadily from one direction, long, slow, and rolling like a vast breath. You close your eyes trying to sense what the navigator feels. At first it is only the rise and fall that makes your stomach sway, but after a while you notice a rhythm, a pulse beneath the waves, as though an invisible hand strokes the sea. It doesn't take long before you realize this rhythm points to something unseen. The orientation of the land itself, hidden far beyond the horizon. The navigator shifts his weight slightly, pressing a hand against the side of the canoe. His face is calm, almost meditative, but you see how intent he is, reading the swells like you might read lines on a map. He has no compass, yet he carries one inside his skin. You marvel at this ability. It feels magical, and yet it is not magic. It is practice memory, and a willingness to trust senses you've forgotten how to use. Above you, the sky turns a flawless blue, streaked with faint, high clouds. These, too, hold messages. The navigator points toward a thin cluster of small cumulus clouds, far in the distance. He speaks quietly, almost like a teacher correcting a pupil. Those clouds gather above islands. Warm air rises, moisture condenses, and a faint cluster forms, like a signal flag in the sky. To you it seems impossibly subtle, but to him it is as clear as a signpost on a road. You feel a thrill. Land might not be visible yet, but already the ocean is whispering its location. It is almost like a secret shared only with those who know how to listen. Hours pass, the sun climbs, and the canoe glides onward. You dip your hand into the sea to cool yourself, then taste the salt drying on your skin. The navigator offers you a sip of water from a gourd, and you drink gratefully. He does not speak often, but when he does, it's to direct your attention outward, to a change in wind, to the arc of a seabird, to the streak of foam left by the hull. It is like being taught a language you once knew as a child and are slowly remembering again. And then comes the birds themselves. At first only a few white specks wheeling high above the waves. They circle, dive, rise again, tireless in their search. The navigator watches closely. He tells you that certain birds never venture far from land. Their presence is a compass of feathers and wings. Each sweep of their flight describes a circle whose center lies on an island you cannot yet see. By afternoon you begin to recognize them, not just birds but messengers. A tern gliding low to the surface, a frigate bird soaring high, never dipping to the water, yet always drifting in wide arcs. Each has its own story, its own pattern, and together they sketch the outline of a destination still hidden. The sea is no longer silent to you. It sings through swells and cloud shapes, whispers through birds' wings, and the faintest shifts of wind. You feel a rush of gratitude, not only for the knowledge but for the sense of belonging it gives you. For the first time, you don't feel like an outsider in this vastness. You feel initiated, as though the Pacific itself has welcomed you into its circle of listeners. As the sun leans westward, painting the sky with gold, you notice something remarkable. There, faint on the horizon, a smudge. So faint, you think, it must be a trick of your eyes. You blink, and it seems to waver. The navigator nods once, his expression unchanging but his eyes lit with certainty. Land. The word thunders in your heart. Land, found not by instruments or screens, but by the stars, the swells, the fish, the birds, and the clouds. Land revealed through the patience of watching and the humility of listening. Land promised long before it became visible. You grip the side of the canoe, overwhelmed by the realization. For hours, for days, the navigator has trusted in what you might once have dismissed as chance. A leaping fish, a cloud bank, a shift in the wind. And now that trust has carried you to this moment, to the faint grey outline rising from the sea. The canoe continues steadily, slicing the waves as though it knows the way. And perhaps, in some ancient sense, it does. Perhaps the canoe itself is a memory of journeys past, its wood and lashing steeped in the voices of ancestors who sailed before. You lean forward, eyes straining toward that smudge of land, your pulse racing. For the first time since the voyage began, you don't feel small. You feel part of something vast and enduring. You feel at home. The island grows clearer as the canoe presses forward. What was once a blur on the horizon now sharpens into form, a line of green rising from the sea, edged with pale sand, crowned with the dark silhouettes of palms swaying gently in the wind. The sight is so striking that you forget to breathe for a moment. You feel as though you are witnessing the world being born anew, land emerging from nothing, a promise fulfilled. The navigator doesn't shout or celebrate. He simply nods once again, as though acknowledging an old friend waiting patiently. For him, this is not surprise but recognition. You realize that for generations, navigators have felt this same confirmation, this same joy hidden beneath composure. Each time an island appeared, it must have carried both relief and reverence. As the canoe draws nearer, the sea itself begins to change. The swells that had been steady and long now break differently, caught and redirected by the shallow reef. Below, you can hear the new music of water crashing against coral, a thunderous rhythm that echoes across the waves. The air smells different too, less of salt, more of greenery and damp soil. It is as if the island itself is breathing, welcoming you with its fragrance. Birds grow more numerous, their cries sharp against the hum of the wind. They wheel above the canoe, darting toward the island, then veering back out to sea as though guiding you in. The navigator watches, lips curved in the faintest smile. The seabirds are not just markers of land, they are guardians, witnesses, participants in this ancient dialogue between sea and sky. Soon you can see the outline of the reef. The navigator steers carefully, his paddle carving decisive strokes. The canoe glides past whitecaps, finding a narrow channel where the water deepens again, clear enough that you can see flashes of coral and darting fish below. It feels almost unreal. So many signs, so many voices of the ocean converging here, all pointing toward this one place. At last the keel scrapes lightly against sand. The canoe rests half in water, half on land, as though exhausted but triumphant. You step down, your feet sinking into the warm, grainy shore. The sensation is shocking after so many days afloat. It anchors you, grounds you. You kneel, scooping up a handful of sand, letting it slip between your fingers. Each grain feels like a jewel. You glance back at the navigator. He has already risen, his posture calm but proud. He looks not at the island, but at the sea, as though paying silent respect. It strikes you that this is not just arrival, it is communion. The ocean has given its guidance and now it must be acknowledged. For a long while you simply stand there, listening to the waves and the calls of the birds, feeling the wind rush from the island's interior. It is alive, all of it. Not just the land but the sea that carried you, the stars that guided you, the clouds that whispered, the fish that leapt, the birds that circled. Everything is connected, and you have been allowed to witness the thread that binds it all. You realize you will never look at the world the same way again. The hum of an engine, the glare of a screen, the arrow of a GPS map, these things feel pale compared to what you have just lived. To find your way across the greatest ocean on Earth, using nothing but your senses, your memory, and the patience of listening, it is not just skill. It is a kind of faith. The island waits ahead, lush and mysterious. You know that stepping into its forest will be a new chapter, filled with its own lessons. But for now, you linger on the shore, savoring the moment when the journey and the destination meet. The canoe rests behind you. The waves sigh around you and the horizon stretches endlessly outward. For the first time in a long while, you feel truly at peace. You belong to the sea now, not as its master, not as its owner, but as one of its students, forever changed by its teachings. And in the quiet of that realization, you understand something profound. The voyage was never about reaching land. It was about learning to see. The island may be under your feet now, but the night sky still claims your attention. As dusk settles, the clouds fade, and above you the heavens spread wide, brilliant and steady. The familiar smear of the Milky Way stretches across and near. Its edge glows the Small Magellanic Cloud. You tilt your head, seeing it not as a fuzzy patch but as a marker, a companion that has hovered through the voyage, guiding you across impossible distances. The navigator sits nearby, cross-legged. On the sand, eyes lifted skyward, his lips move silently, tracing patterns you cannot hear, as though he's reading a text only he can see. You realize that for him, this sky is a map as intricate as any paper chart, except alive, always shifting, never static. Every star holds, meaning every cluster a reminder of direction, season, or story. As night deepens, more stars flicker into view, like embers scattered by a cosmic hand. You remember how out at sea, these stars became your road, fixed points amid a rolling world. But here on land, their stories grow larger. The navigator begins to murmur to you, telling of how the sky itself is a great ocean mirrored above. Just as you cross the sea below, the ancestors crossed this starry expanse, their canoes moving not only between islands, but between realms of meaning. You hear about a constellation shaped like a canoe, gliding forever across the heavens. He points it out, his finger sweeping upward with reverence. Then he mentions that Polynesians once believed that the souls of the departed traveled into the sky along the path of the Milky Way, joining the stars they had trusted in life. It's a thought both comforting and a little eerie. You glance upward, half expecting to see familiar faces glowing faintly back. Mainstream astronomy, of course, calls the Small Magellanic Cloud a dwarf galaxy, a satellite of the Milky Way, filled with billions of stars. Scientists measure its light, its distance, its motion, as though cataloguing a faraway city. Yet here, under this sky, the small cloud feels closer, like a lantern deliberately hung above the ocean so travelers could find their way. Astronomers still argue whether its peculiar shape is due to gravitational tides or past collisions with its twin, the large Magellanic Cloud. But for your navigator, the debate is irrelevant. The cloud exists to guide. That is enough. He chuckles suddenly and tells you a quirkier story that some old islanders joked the Magellanic Clouds were smoke from giant cooking fires in the heavens. When the smoke drifted down, it helped seed the winds that carried canoes. You picture a celestial grandmother stirring her pot, accidentally puffing her smoke across galaxies, and you can't help but grin. As the stories layer one atop the other, science, myth, joke, you realize they're not in conflict. They are threads of the same fabric, woven tightly so that no one stands alone. The stars can be galaxies and lanterns, physics and spirits, fact and metaphor. Your modern world prefers to separate, to label, to choose one meaning. But here, meanings are cumulative, stacking like stones until they make something greater than the sum of their parts. The longer you listen, the more you feel yourself becoming part of the rhythm. The ocean sighs against the shore. The trees rustle, the stars wheel above, all moving in patterns so vast you cannot hope to master them. Yet simply noticing them makes you feel steadier. You remember the navigator's patience at sea, his unhurried way of adjusting course. He never rushed, never fretted. To him, the voyage was not a battle against the ocean, but a conversation. And you realize life might be the same. The stars don't shout directions. The ocean doesn't wave arrows. Everything whispers instead, softly, persistently, waiting for you to listen. You think about how rarely back home you ever listen. Maybe that's what this night under the Small Magellanic Cloud is for. Not to teach you how to sail, but how to hear. The fire burns low behind you, and you find yourself lying on the sand, gazing upward. The sky seems endless, but also strangely intimate, as though it bends close to watch you. The cloud glows faintly, unchanged, a reminder of where you've been and what remains possible. For the first time in days, you let your eyelids drift down, not out of exhaustion, but because the rhythm of the stars is so steady that sleep feels like the most natural continuation. Somewhere nearby, the navigator hums, low and steady. You drift between waking and dreaming, unsure whether the stars above are fixed in place or moving slowly across the sea of the sky. Either way, you feel safe. The ocean brought you here. The stars guided you, and both will still be there when you wake. Morning comes gently, not with an alarm, but with the sigh of waves and the warmth of sunlight filtering through palm fronds. You stir on the sand, eyes opening to the soft light of dawn. The fire has gone out, only faint ash remaining, and the navigator already stands near the water's edge, gazing eastward. His silhouette is steady, like a mast planted firmly in the earth. You walk toward him, still carrying the quiet of the night in your chest. The stars have faded, but their memory lingers. You can almost still see the Magellanic Cloud if you squint, like a fading dream refusing to vanish entirely. The navigator points to the horizon. "See how the swell runs," he says softly. The ocean, though seemingly calm, has its own subtle rhythms. Long, deep waves rise and fall, running in steady lines toward shore. "That," he continues, "is another star, except it moves beneath our feet." You look closer, realizing that the waves themselves are a map, constant and predictable. Polynesian sailors once read them like text, tracing directions long after the night sky had vanished with the sun. You recall something from science, that these swells are generated by winds far away, often thousands of miles distant, carrying the memory of storms across whole oceans. They can persist for weeks, long after the winds themselves have died. To modern meteorology, they are the residue of weather, but to the navigator they are living signals, a conversation with the sea. As the sun rises higher, the beach comes, alive with color, the glint of wet sand, the green of leaves, the pale blue sky stretching wide. Yet even in daylight, you notice that the navigator continues to glance upward, measuring the sun's arc, taking bearings without instruments. His mind holds a compass built from light and shadow, one that no shipwreck or lost equipment could erase. You think of how modern navigation depends on satellites orbiting high above. Tiny signals bounce to GPS devices. The navigator's satellites are different: stars, swells, birds, clouds. His data is not stored on screens, but in memory, in stories, in repetition. You wonder which is more fragile, the network of machines that could collapse with a power, failure, or this living chain of knowledge that survives only if someone keeps telling it. Later, as you walk along the shoreline, you notice signs you'd overlooked before. Certain seabirds swoop repeatedly in the same direction, out to sea at dawn, back to land at dusk. Their paths, too, are indicators of distance and direction. Farther inland, plants lean subtly in the direction of prevailing winds. Even the shape of a reef whispers orientation if you care to study it. You realize the navigator carries not one map, but 100, layered across sky, sea, and land. At midday, you sit in the shade while he tells you about the voyaging canoes that once traveled between Hawaii, Aotearoa, Tahiti, Rapa Nui, and beyond. He describes them as if they were still sailing now, their sails bright against the horizon, their crews chanting to keep rhythm with the waves. He reminds you that these were not accidental drifters. They were deliberate travelers, explorers who crossed the largest ocean on Earth without metal, without compasses, without charts, and they succeeded again and again. Science confirms what the navigator says. Archaeologists have traced the spread of Polynesian culture across vast distances, finding shared tools, languages, and plants that could only have traveled by canoe. Genetic studies show connections between island peoples thousands of miles apart. The evidence is clear. This was the greatest maritime expansion of any pre-modern culture. Yet numbers and charts don't quite capture the feeling of what it meant. As the navigator speaks, you picture the courage it took to launch into open water, guided only by trust in stars, swells, and birds. You imagine nights of uncertainty, storms that threatened to scatter canoes, and mornings when the sight of land must have seemed like a miracle, and then you realize it wasn't a miracle at all. It was knowledge practiced and preserved, knowledge carried in chants, in memory, in hands that built canoes and eyes that read stars. Knowledge so strong it survived across generations, across islands, across oceans. As the afternoon stretches on, you feel the pulse of this place more clearly. It isn't just an island, it's a library, holding lessons written not on pages but in waves and skies. Every direction you look offers information, if you only know how to read it. The navigator, seeing your quiet oar, nods knowingly. "The ocean is not empty," he says. "It is full of signs. We only forget to look." Those words stay with you as the sun leans westward, gilding the sea with light. Somewhere beyond the horizon lies another island, unseen but reachable. Once, canoes would already be setting sail, guided by nothing but trust in what the world reveals. You close your eyes and feel for just a moment, as though you too could follow. Evening comes again, soft and deliberate. The horizon swallows the sun, and once more the stars arrive, unveiled one by one like old friends returning. You lie back on the sand, your hands pillowed beneath your head, and the navigator sits beside you. His eyes follow the heavens with the same calm as the night before, though you now recognize the patterns too. What once seemed random points of light are beginning to connect into meaning. The sky feels larger tonight. Or perhaps it is you who have changed. The navigator points out the Southern Cross again, its 4 stars clear against the darkness. We use this to find south, he reminds you, and you realize that directions are not abstractions here. They are embodied, anchored in light. Slowly, he guides you through another story, this time about the path of the moon. You notice how its pale glow arcs differently than the sun's, rising from one horizon and setting on the opposite. To you it is simple beauty. To him it is calculation. The moon's position relative to the stars helps track time, helps anticipate tides, helps steady the voyage. Where you see only silver light, he sees an instrument precise as any clock. You think of time as your world measures it, digital watches, atomic precision, countdowns that tick in seconds. But here, time is marked in phases of the moon, in the slant of sunlight at dawn, in the rhythm of waves that take longer to roll than any second hand. You begin to feel that your version of time is narrower, thinner. This version, lived under the sky, is wider, more human, and yet deeply cosmic. Later, the navigator tells you of a great voyage his grandfather once described, one that lasted many weeks across open ocean. He remembers listening as a boy, hearing how the crew would sing to stay awake, their voices rising in unison against the wind. They kept the canoe steady by watching stars, but also by listening to the sea itself. A shift in the sound of waves, a change in the hiss of foam against wood, told them when currents veered. It was not just sight that guided them, but sound, touch, even smell. And you realize then how rich this knowledge truly is. Modern navigation narrows itself to numbers and screens, but the navigator's way embraces the whole body. His ears, his skin, his balance, his memory, all are tools. His body is an instrument tuned to the planet. The night grows deeper. Above, the Milky Way stretches wide like a path across the heavens. The navigator calls it a canoe itself, forever sailing. The dark. When you look at this, he says, you are seeing where to go, but also where we came from. Our ancestors followed these lights. They still do. You lie quietly, letting those words settle. It occurs to you that the stars are not just guides for journeys across oceans. They are guides for journeys within, reminders of scale and connection. To look at them is to remember that you are part of something vast, both fragile and enduring. The fire is lit again, flickering low between you. The navigator says little more, content to let silence do its work. You think back to the day, to the swells, to the birds, to the sun's arc. And now, as night completes the circle, you feel how everything links together. Sky to sea, day to night, memory to future. Your eyelids grow heavy, but you resist sleep just long enough to watch Orion rise, steady and strong. Somewhere inside, something has shifted. You are no longer just observing the navigator's way. You are beginning to learn it, even if faintly. As the stars wheel above and the waves whisper below, you close your eyes. Tomorrow will bring new lessons. For tonight the world itself is enough. The next morning begins not with a rooster's crow, but with the hush of dawn sliding across the horizon. You rise slowly, your joints stiff from sand, but your mind surprisingly clear. The navigator is already awake, crouched low at the edge of the canoe, running his hand in the water as though testing its temperature. He doesn't look up, but he knows you are there. He always knows. The day stretches long and the sun climbs steadily. The heat thickens, but instead of retreating into shade, you stay near him. You are beginning to notice things. The angle of the wind on your cheek, the subtle roll of the swell, the faint line of foam curling differently on one side than the other. You are seeing with borrowed eyes. By mid-afternoon, the navigator begins to teach you a chant. It is simple, rhythmic, almost hypnotic, the kind of melody that anchors memory. Each phrase holds the name of a star, a direction, a pattern. When you stumble, he chuckles lightly, reminding you that learning the sky is like learning a language. You don't master it overnight. You grow fluent only after long listening. You find yourself humming the chant, its syllables sticking like seeds. The words taste strange in your mouth, but they begin to anchor themselves there. Each time the navigator corrects you, his tone is kind but firm. The sky does not forgive mistakes, he says, but it rewards patience. You file that away like a proverb. As dusk drapes its curtain once again, the chant takes on power. The stars emerge in the same familiar order, but now you have a thread to follow them by. The Southern Cross tilts low, Orion's belt glimmers, the Small Magellanic Cloud gleams faint and ghostly. You name them aloud, clumsy but proud. The navigator nods, approval hidden in his stillness. Then he shares a tale, one of ancestors who followed the very same lights, across waters filled with danger. They believed the stars were ancestors. Themselves, he says, watching, guiding, reminding us not to stray. You pause, considering that. To you, stars have always been distant fires, nuclear engines burning far away. Science has stripped them bare, explained their heat, their light, their fusion. But here, under this vast canopy, you almost prefer the older truth, the one that sees them as family, guardians above. After all, isn't knowledge always two things at once? What we can measure and what we can feel. The night deepens, and the sea seems to settle, though you know it is only your heart that has calmed. The navigator continues, describing how stars mark not just direction but also season. Some stars rise only in winter, some only in summer. We know what birds will come, what fish will swim, what storms will arrive, because the sky tells us. Astronomers still argue whether Polynesian navigators used star lines alone or combined them with advanced memorization grids. You don't care who is right. What matters is that the knowledge works. You see it before your eyes. The night sky isn't abstract. It's alive, a calendar, a compass, a clock. Later, when the fire is rekindled, you sit in its glow, staring at the sparks climbing into the dark. They rise briefly, then fade like miniature stars that burn out too quickly. You laugh at yourself, another metaphor, another sleepy thought. But here, metaphors feel natural. The world insists on them. You look up once more before sleep. The stars are bright, but it is the chant echoing softly in your head that steadies you. It lulls you like a lullaby, blending with the hiss of the waves. Your body grows heavy, and you give in to the rhythm. The navigator's voice is the last thing. You hear whispering gently, "The ocean and the sky are one, remember that." The final night arrives with a hush that feels ceremonial. The canoe glides steady across the water, the stars overhead brighter than you have ever seen them. You find yourself whispering the chant again, more confident this time, as if the syllables have found a home in your throat. The navigator sits beside you, not correcting, not teaching, just listening. For the first time, you feel like you are no longer a student, but a fellow traveler. The Southern Cross dips low, pointing toward the horizon, while the Small Magellanic Cloud hangs luminous and faint, like smoke rising from an unseen fire. The sky has become a map you can read, a book written in light. And though you know you're still an amateur compared to the navigator, you also know you've learned enough to feel a strange kinship with the ocean. You've stepped inside a knowledge that doesn't belong to textbooks. It belongs to memory, to rhythm, to repetition. A breeze passes, soft but insistent, carrying salt to your lips. You close your eyes, letting it brush against you, listening to the waves thrum against the hull. The ocean speaks in patterns you are finally beginning to hear. The navigator tells you one last story, a legend of a canoe that lost its way when its navigator grew arrogant, believing he no longer needed the stars. He thought he was greater than the sea, the elder says softly. But the sea is older than pride. There is no laughter in his tone, only a gentle warning. You nod, knowing that arrogance is as dangerous as ignorance. The stars above, though, are forgiving tonight. They hold steady in their courses, offering their paths as they always have. Astronomers still argue whether Polynesian voyagers discovered every island by intent or by chance. But out here, under this vast canopy, you realize the debate misses the point. Whether accident or design, the truth is that people dared to cross impossible distances with only the stars as their guide. You tilt your head back, staring at the Small Magellanic Cloud until your eyes ache. It looks like a smear of breath on glass, delicate and fragile, yet it has endured for billions of years. You think of the sailors who saw it before you, of how they carried its ghostly light in their memory across oceans, how they trusted it, like a companion. You wonder if centuries from now someone will still whisper its name, still follow its glow. The night deepens, and you feel the weight of it settle into your bones. Not heavy, but comforting, like a blanket. The fire has burned low, the canoe rocks gently, and your eyelids slip down as though tugged by invisible strings. It is then that the wind down begins. The stars above grow softer, their edges blurred, as if someone is dimming a lantern in slow motion. The chant in your head, once sharp, now drifts like a lullaby stretched thin. The canoe feels steady, cradling you the way a hammock sways. Each sound fades, one by one. The murmur of water, the whistle of wind, the faint creak of the hull, until they are only suggestions, background hums that barely touch your ears. Your breath slows to match the rhythm of the sea. In, out, rise, fall. The same rhythm that countless voyagers have breathed before. The same rhythm the ocean has carried for eternity. You realize in this drowsy haze that you are part of that rhythm now, stitched into its fabric whether you meant to be or not. The sky, once so alive with detail, melts into a soft canopy. The Small Magellanic Cloud drifts into a dreamlike glow, no longer something to study, but something to surrender to. You imagine it as a lantern hanging above you, faint and eternal, a quiet promise that even in darkness there is always a direction, always a guide. The navigator's voice lingers in memory, gentle and reassuring. The ocean and the sky are one, remember that. The words become your own thought, then your own dream, until they dissolve into the hush of sleep. Now let yourself sink deeper, letting every muscle release, every thought loosen its grip. You are carried not by effort, not by fear, but by trust. The canoe rocks, the stars dim, the world softens, and all that remains is rest. Good night.